There is a theory which states that if ever anyone discovers exactly what the universe is for and why it is here, it will instantly disappear and be replaced by something even more bizarrely inexplicable. There is another theory which states that this has already happened.
I've been meaning to get to Space Laser Lady for some weeks with a little historical perspective on today's conservative and factional bigotry, because their incoherence is both comedic and demonstrative of the congenital stupidity of the wealthy that fund them. Best of all, there is no penalty for witting, because we can rely on conservatives to provide an inexhaustible and constantly evolving supply of insanity. They do deliver. You gotta give them that. But first, before continuing, two little pieces of historical context I would like people to have fresh in their minds before commenting further. These may be things you know, they may be things you don't know, and if you don't know, you might find them interesting to have learned about.
Jesus of Nazareth was a Jew who preached a singular religious message. The first Christians were Jews who prayed in Hebrew and observed the customs and religious rituals of Judaism. The Last Supper was a Jewish religious meal, probably at Passover. Jesus was put to death at the hands of Roman authorities under Pontius Pilate in Judea, but the gospel accounts were interpreted as blaming all Jews for the crucifixion. To his followers, Jesus was the Christ, the Messiah, his death, sacrificial atonement. Most Jews believed the Messiah had not yet come. Redemption was not at hand. Soon after the crucifixion, Roman armies destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. Jews were exiled and scattered to live as a dispersed minority. By the 5th century, Christianity had become the dominant religion in the Roman Empire.
Welcome to the R-rated roller coaster ride that is ancient Christian heresiology. This was the field of ancient scholarship wherein proto-Orthodox church fathers wrote against those who held to Christian theology other than their own. Here are a few things to know as we get into this. One, when I say proto-Orthodox, I'm using the term as New Testament scholar Bart Ehrman does.
Why do I use the term proto-Orthodox? Well, there's one group of Christianity that ended up winning out, deciding what's to be believed. The other groups were declared at that point to be heresies. What about the people who believed that view before it became orthodoxy? That's what I call proto-Orthodoxy.
The writings of heresiologists often included extensive diatribes about the moral failures of the sects they sought to refute. Many of the moral transgressions discussed, though, are so extreme as to strain credulity among any cautious reader. Simply put, these church fathers accused other Christians with which they had theological differences, and who probably shared a church with them very often, of doing things that were so abusive and disgusting that, well, it's kind of unbelievable, literally. Just heads up, we'll start in Panarion 26, 4:1. But I shall get right down to the worst part of the deadly description of them, for they vary in their wicked teaching of what they please, which is, first of all, that they hold their wives in common. And if a guest who is of their persuasion arrives, they have a sign that men give women and women give men, a tickling of the palms as they clasp hands in supposed greeting, to show that the visitor is of their religion. And once they recognize each other from this, they start feasting right away, and they set the table with lavish provisions for eating meat and drinking wine, even if they are poor. But then, after a drinking bout and, let us say, stuffing their overstuffed veins, they get hot for each other next, and the husband will move away from his wife and tell her, speaking to his own wife, "Get up, perform the agape with the brother." Oh my. For after having made love with the passion of fornication, in addition to lift their blasphemy up to heaven, the woman and man receive the man's emission on their own hands, and they stand with their eyes raised heavenward, but the filth on their hands, and pray, if you please, the ones they call stratiotics and Gnostics, and offer that stuff on their hands to the true Father of all, and say, we offer thee this gift, the body of Christ. And then they eat it, partaking of their own dirt, and saying, this is the body of Christ, and this is the Pascha, because of which our bodies suffer and are compelled to acknowledge the passion of Christ. And so with the woman's emission, when she happens to be having her period, they likewise take the unclean menstrual blood they gather from her and eat it in common. And this, they say, is the blood of Christ. All right, yeah, I guess that's one way to perform the Eucharist. Apparently, though, this group had even more special ways of doing that, skipping ahead to 5-4. But even though one of them should accidentally implant the seed of his natural emission prematurely and the woman becomes pregnant, listen to a more dreadful thing that such people venture to do. They extract the fetus at the stage which is appropriate for their enterprise, take this aborted infant and cut it up in a trough with a pestle, and they mix honey, pepper, and certain other perfumes and spices with it to keep from getting sick, and then all the revelers in this herd of swine and dogs assemble, and each eats a piece of the child with his fingers. And now, after this cannibalism, they pray to God and say, we are not mocked by the archon of lust, but have gathered the brothers' blunder up. And this, if you please, is their idea of the perfect Passover. So, I have a question. Epiphanius, how exactly did you come to know all of this?
And with that bit of history in place, we can now return our attention to the lovely world of conservative media business. On the one hand, we're dealt with the spectacle of a very anti-Semitic Crowder taking potshots at both Bernie and then, of course, Daily Wire, because he got into a spat with them. It looks from ignorance. And keep in mind that Fox, the largest and obviously mainstream conservative outlet, falls into the same camp as Crowder. They are not as overt about it, but they're in that camp. Because Murdoch. Because Crowder is an asshat, and because he's a bigot, he has taken a poke at some of the founders of Daily Wire, who also helped found PragerU. The individuals who helped found Daily Wire as well as PragerU are the Wilkes brothers. They are fracking billionaires. They follow a faith called the Assemblies of Yahweh, who strive to, in some ways, replicate early Christianity. That is, they follow Jewish practice, but they believe Jesus is the Messiah. The Daily Wire represents a microcosm of the larger conservative media environment. You have Matt Walsh, who is a Catholic religious bigot and pervert from all appearances. He doesn't elect to go down the anti-Semitic route for obvious reasons. And then you have Ben, who some people mock as the self-proclaimed Pope of the Jews, which is a bit hilarious. And Candace, dear Candace, and her amazing flexibility. She's quite happy to embrace all sorts of views, as she demonstrated with Kane West. It would be very interesting to imagine them all sharing a meal. Where do you think Candace or even Matt Walsh might find themselves at that kind of table? I will mention two more outlets people know about but may not know who helped fund them. The first is Bernard Marcus, who is a co-founder of Home Depot. And he found Turning Points USA. So you can kind of think of Charlie Kirk falling into his sphere of influence. Now, Bernard's an interesting character. He's a little different than most billionaires. He's actually come out in public and said that his workers, he thinks of his workers as lazy and not interested in working. Yeah, that guy. The last name and outlet I will mention is Robert Mercer, who helped fund and found Brightbird. So in one corner, you've got mainstream bigoted Christianity in the form of Fox, in satellite, crazy satellites like Crowder. And in the other corner, you have the traditional targets of Christian religious bigotry, who have a number of outlets that have been very, very good at recruiting young people into Christian religious bigotry. Yeah, don't ask me to explain that.
Arrogance and stupidity all in the same package. How efficient of you.
The reason why I consider this to be the folly of a congenitally stupid wealthy is that none of the radicalized elements of the American right are loyal to the plutocrats. They stay out of sight. Their only advantage is that they can hop in the private jets and run off to their safe houses wherever they have them scattered around the world. But in the meantime, you have the possibility of a, popular public figure, politician, somebody, well, maybe DeSantis, but somebody like a Putin who can seize power. And then suddenly, billionaires, all of them, they start falling out of windows and off balconies and that sort of thing.
Hey, did you see that?
Or they
Did you see somebody go past the window?
become disfavored in particular ways. So, yeah, that's the thought. And that's all for now.